Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. It's a big hall. Thank you. So I'd like to welcome you to the inaugural ICON Youth Forum. And the title for tonight's event is Reforming Malaysians, a conversation with Razak Baginda. My name is Faris. I'm from ICON. Allow me a few words of introduction to ICON. ICON is a private think tank founded by a number of individuals here in Kuala Lumpur. The name ICON does not come from the word icon itself, but from the word iconoclastic, which can be defined as to challenge prevailing norms and views. Now, we feel that this is vital, especially in today's day and age where there is such a wealth of information, or should I say disinformation as well. So there's such a wealth of information and disinformation so readily available, and it's difficult to navigate and see what and to check the authenticity of this information. So to do this ICON, what we do is we facilitate different forums and mediums to encourage open debate and discussion. A number of our activities, I'll just give you a number of activities that we do. We have the ICON Diplomatic Dispatch, which is catered to the international community. At these events, what we do is we give key updates to the international community in the fields of economics, policy, and politics. We also have the ICON Leadership Academy, which is in its planning stage, where we aim to equip future leaders with the necessary skills required in today's environment. Lastly, we also have the ICON Youth Forum, where today is our inaugural Youth Forum, which is catered to the youth of Malaysia. And it highlights relevant or current issues applicable to this segment of society. So before I introduce the moderator, I'd just like to highlight a particular rule that we have at all our events. We operate under the Chatham House rules. And what this means, the gist of it is, everything in this event is off the record. So we would appreciate if there will be no recordings, and we want everyone to feel comfortable in expressing their views. We would encourage everyone to express their views and their points. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Mr. Wan Ahmad Faisal. Faisal is a fellow at the Putra Business School. He writes avidly in the fields of religion, economics, history, and geopolitics. And tonight he will be moderating this evening session. So thank you. Faisal?
All right. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good evening. Thank you, Dr. Faris, for the introduction. And welcome to all guests, honorable guests from embassies and also public. I believe this is the inaugural public forum organized by ICON. Without further ado, I would like to give a little bit of introduction about our honorable speaker for today. As we all know, Dr. Razak Baginda is currently director of a UK-based charitable organization, the Islamic Peace Foundation. He was previously the head of strategic studies and international relations at the Malaysian Armed Forces Defence College, executive director of the Malaysian Strategic Research Centre, and senior member of St. Anthony's College, Oxford. He received his doctorate from the University of Oxford, and for your information, his thesis title is China-Malaysia Relations and Foreign Policy, already published by Routledge. You can see the book outside. And today, I will be moderating the session. As we all know, the topic is very much wide and also vast, in a sense that it encapsulates the huge theme that currently, I would say, governs our issues in Malaysia, reforming Malaysians. So before I pass this mic to Dr. Razak, maybe I would like to explain a little bit on the topic so that we can paint the canvas and in order for us to have meaningful conversation afterwards. The word reform is very important and also precise to describe the urgent need for this nation of ours. We all know currently we are being engulfed by many challenges, especially in politics, in economy, what more, and also in our race relations. And to focus also on this concept called Malaysian, yeah, an identity that is still debatable, whether it is something representative to describe the nature of our people, or are we still, meaning to say we are still governed by our race-based mentality, and the meaning to be Malaysian is just another form of formal identity in your identity card, perhaps. So these are things that we would love to hear from Dr. Razak himself. And of course, I would love to know more also about his views on Malaysia's position in the world today, because this is his forte in Malaysia strategic studies and also on defense. So I will pass this mic to Dr. Razak for his deliberation. Oh yeah, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Wan. Assalamu alaikum and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I must first say that this is my first public appearance after almost 10 years. It's been a while since I've spoken to an audience in Malaysia. I have spoken in various forums abroad, but this is the first time I am here in KL. So so it's good to be back. Although, when the idea of me talking to a public forum was being couched a few months ago, I accepted that with both trepidation and with alacrity. Trepidation because it's the first time I have, when I'm appearing in a Malaysian audience, given my rather checkered background. At the same time, I welcome the opportunity to actually confront those who accuse me in a way, but more than that, to share with all of you some of my observation and views about Malaysia. So I thank all of you for your appearance this evening, and also to Icon and you one. It is a conversation, meaning it's not a monologue. I hope after this we will have a meaningful dialogue. So I will try to keep my comments rather brief. I think the main objective, is for us to try to make some sense of where Malaysia is. In fact, I was talking to a dear friend of mine. If I am in showbiz, which I'm not, I would have this song. If you belong to the 1960s, which most of you do not, I will have Marvin Gaye's song, What's Going On, playing while I enter the audience, while I enter the hall. And some of you may wonder, it is a song in the 1960s or 70s. What's Going On is a very pertinent, very poignant song, which befitted the times in the United States. This was a song, What's Going On, by Marvin Gaye, one of the greatest Motown singer of his time. It's about what was going on in American society. Particularly, it's about the US forces in Vietnam. As you know, at the height of the Vietnam War, there was some 500,000 GI soldiers, American soldiers, serving in Vietnam. And almost 50,000 of them perished. And the pertinent question what was going on was what was going on to American society during this period. There was protests, there was all sorts of things taking place in America, within America. Questions of civil rights, even though they have crossed the barrier of civil rights in the 60s, but there were lots of questions, one of which is, what was America doing so far away in Southeast Asia, where 50,000 of its GI troops perished? So I thought it would be befitting for today to have this song, because I think it's also pertinent and relevant in today's context in Malaysia. So what's going on in our country? So I thought maybe, but of course I'm not in showbiz, so I'm not going to do that. So I think it's important to me to make some sense of what is going on in Malaysia. Now I come from a varied background. I always pride myself that I am a true Malaysian. Not that I am patriotic or nationalistic, far from it. I'm not patriotic, neither am I nationalistic. But I'm a true Malaysian because I come from a mixed parentage. My mother is Chinese, I'm very proud of that, and my father is Malay, and I'm equally proud of that. And I'm equally proud to say that my grandfather on my maternal side comes from Suzhou, which is in China, which is only 1 hour drive from Shanghai. And I'm extremely proud of that. And my father's side comes from Sumatra. So when I look at this debate taking place in Malaysia, which I will allude to, about pendatang, I laugh. Because I tell you, every one of us is pendatang. Because no one is... how many of you have actually seen Barack Obama's excellent reply to about all this immigration issue in the United States? And I thought that was a brilliant reply. And I hope that one of our politician, government, hopefully, would actually say exactly what Obama said. And Obama said, none of us are, the only pure American, if you like, are Native American. And that's it. All of them come from different parts of the world. So in a way, so I think number one is very important to put things into proper perspective. I have chosen this audience simply because I feel that I'm talking to a discerning group of people. I'm not sounding arrogant if I say that I hope, and I make a plea, that by talking to a discerning audience, I'm talking to an audience who will better appreciate the need for dialogue and not the need to make something out of nothing in that sense. So I think that's the reason why I've chosen such a platform, having kept mum over the last 10 years. And the reason why I've kept mum is because everything I say has enormous implication following day. So I hope that's not going to happen today. So I also think that I do not expect everyone to agree with me, but I think it's important for us to try to understand each other's point of view. I sincerely believe that a plurality of ideas is what we need. It is the cornerstone of a dynamic society, and I shudder to think that if we do not have plurality of ideas, that means differing ideas, different viewpoints, we're going to stagnate. And differing points doesn't mean extreme views. And today I look at Malaysia and I see that there are very extreme views, but very few what I call constructive views. Either you are with us or you're against us. That sort of divide. And I think this is not healthy for a country like Malaysia. So I think it's also very important, I think, to remember that I've been around for a while, and I think Malaysia is undergoing an experiment. And I'll make my point a little clearer later. It is probably the greatest experiment in Malaysian history. It is actually transiting from one level of society to the next. And this is probably the most challenging of any society in the world. I'm not saying Malaysia is unique in that respect. Many societies in different parts of the world have undergone that. Some have failed, some have been successful. So I think it's very important, to keep that in mind. So I want to highlight just two major points, which I hope will be, if you like, a curtain raiser, if you like, for the conversation that I hope will ensue after this. The first is about the concept of democracy. It is a much misused, abused term. In fact, people talk about democracy and having even not read some of the philosophers of whether from Plato or modern thinking around democracy. People talk of democracy as if they know what it means. And I think, I'm not going to intellectualize the term democracy, but I think it's important to know what it means. And I'm certainly not going to give you a lecture about democracy, but I think let me just tell you what is out there. To those against the government, democracy means when the opposition comes in. When the opposition comes in, hooray, democracy is alive. Well, democracy is good, opposition is in. To the government, attacking dissenting views is to defend democracy. So, it's very interesting that on the one hand, you have those who are against government, and they will say, and the opposition comes in, it's democracy. If the government, and if the government wins, they say, oh my God, there's cheating somewhere, let's call this, let's call that. And on the government side, when someone has a different view of the government and they're being attacked, and they will say, we are defending democracy. Now, it doesn't, to me, it's not going to get anywhere. Let me quote Churchill, one of my favorite, Churchill, I think a couple of years ago, there was a survey done in the United Kingdom about who was the greatest Briton ever in the history, in the long history of the English Channel, English Isles. And Churchill was voted the most popular. He was not exactly the best liked, but he was the most popular. You don't have to be liked to be popular. And he said, interestingly enough, about democracy, Churchill once said, democracy is the worst form of government. A lot of people quote Churchill that, but actually there's another sentence that goes which a lot of people do not quote, and he said, but actually nothing else is better. So in a way, it's the worst form of government, but actually there's not a lot of choices out there. So let me first, if you look at democracy in Malaysia, and I think Malaysia is undergoing a political democratic transition. It is moving from what I can best describe, for a lack of a better term, from adolescent democracy to adulthood. So you're like a teenager, right? And you're moving up to being an adult. All of us in this room, I would hope all of you have gone through that period, and you know how difficult it is, physically and otherwise, to adjust from being an adolescent to being an adult. And I would describe Malaysia as transiting between these two significant levels, from an adolescent period to what I call adulthood. And I think this is the most biggest challenge ahead of us. Putting in general terms, and I'll be very brief, there are two very broad democratic experiments that we've seen in the annals of democratic history in the world. One, the matured democracies of the Western world, which does include a number of countries outside Western Europe and the United States and Canada and a few other countries, Japan, of course. And you have what I would describe as new and emerging democracies. Indonesia, Thailand, and a few other examples. And Malaysia is certainly not the same category as any Western democracy. Neither is it a new emerging democracy. We have, after all, we have some semblance of democracy in this country since independence. We can debate until the cow comes home as to what we mean by democracy, but let's put that aside. But if you look at the democratic journey of Malaysia, it's very clear that we have had an uninterrupted peace, at least some semblance of democracy, since 1957, with the exception of 1969. So in that sense, we are not which is Western democracy, neither are we new emerging democracies. What is out there in the world? And I think, I'm not going to stand here and defend the government, or neither am I going to or talk on behalf of the opposition. I hope I stand here as someone who's very concerned about what's happening in Malaysia. And I think the point is, sometimes we fail to realize what is exactly out there in the world. We have many failed states. Look at the Middle East. It's a catalogue of failures. And you have an array of all types of governments, if you like, in all forms. From absolute monarchies of Qatar, UAE, of course, the famous Saudi Arabia, and you have theocratic governments of Iran. You have absolute monarchies, as I said. You have dictatorial regimes. And you have only one democratic, what I call a democratic oasis in a non-democratic desert. And that is in the Middle East, much as I hate to admit, is actually Israel. Do you realize that Israel is the only democratic country in the whole of Middle East? It's the only oasis in the desert. Everything else in the Middle East is an utter failure. If you talk to any Syrian national, they will tell you, God Almighty, if we had not protested the way we did in 2011, none of the carnage would have taken place from 2011. It's like I'm a movie buff. I love movies. And one of the horror movies I like is of course Dracula. Whether it's Christopher Lee or the new version, or God knows, I like one of the best, just a sidetrack, and it's dangerous when I sidetrack. One of my best movies of vampire is actually Interview with Empire, I think. Interview with Empire, where you have three of the most handsome actors imaginable. Brad Pitt, you have Antonio Banderas, and you have Tom Cruise, all playing, and of course you have Christopher Slater, all four playing different forms of Dracula. Anyway, if you look at in terms of, you see, I forgot my point now. That's a good trick when you can't remember your point. You digress. If you look at in terms of, look at Syria. The reason why I wanted to mention about Dracula is once you taste blood, you go for it, right? And once you lose peace, it's very difficult to get it back. Today, Syria is a sad state of affairs. You ask any Syrian or what is happening, or even neighboring Syria, whether it's Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, or any other countries, they will tell you the horrific stories of what has happened. And you look at what has happened in Syria domestically, the rest is history. Let me move on because I have a signal saying time to move on. Now, if you look at in terms of where we are, I think it is important to look at our neighbors. In a way, if you look at Southeast Asia, I'm not saying Malaysia is like Israel, but Malaysia is probably a democratic oasis, not in a non-democratic desert, but with new emerging democratic desert. Let me make my point. Indonesia, we hear about the appointment of the election of thank you, Jokowi. Jokowi, and a populist who became a president. And do you know it's very new Indonesia? It's a new democracy. Let's not forget that before democracy came to the shores of Indonesia, you have had a series of military, the role of Golkar is still very strong, and the role of the TNI ABRI is still very strong in Indonesian society. The other one, our neighbor up north, Thailand, it's a classic example. And I think we all need to know what's happening in Thailand and how the red shirts and the yellow shirts, sounds familiar, doesn't it? In Thailand, how that has basically, halted the process of democracy. And if you think what's happening in Thailand at the moment, it's a bloody military running the country. You can say, wow, wonderful, the former prime minister is now indicted. Wonderful, fantastic. But who's bloody running the country? It's the military. Is that democracy? It's something which I think we have to put into proper perspective. So let me move to my next point, which is going to be extremely brief. And that's about race relations. Any political observer, societal observer of Malaysia will tell you that this is a main feature of the landscape of Malaysia, the race relations. In fact, if you ponder and look at the history of Malaysia, it is indeed a miracle that since 1957, there's only been one, what I call a violent disruption in our society in 1969, in May 1969. Now, I think that's a miracle. Why that is so? You can, if you are, you could say that through high-handedness of the government, through sheer power, the government has come down very strong against dissenting views, against those who profess violence. You could also say that sanity always prevails in Malaysia. Before the Malays and the Chinese start killing each other, they say, oh, hang on a minute. Will my nasi lemak stall be disrupted? Or will my kway teow stall be disrupted? Who's going to pay my bank loan? Good Lord. There'll be disruption for 6 months, and after that, the bank will come back and ask for 6 months now, and all that. So in the end, in Malaysia, perhaps you say sanity has prevailed in Malaysia. Perhaps. The question then is, will sanity continue to prevail in this country of ours? And I think, I will end with that for now, is that I think that is the most pertinent question. And I am, as a Malaysian, as a true Malaysian, I feel that that is one of the most biggest challenge facing us. When I see both sides to the divide on racial grounds, I get very worried. And I wonder whether sanity will continue to prevail in this only oasis in this region of ours. Let me end there, and I will take questions. Thank you very much.